There.
Okay.
For
Sorry
one, for
about
once,
all the trouble.
no. Well, hey, for once, it's not my end. Usually, it's my end that's giving me the issues.
Right.
That's all too funny for me. But yes, we got you connected finally. So, how's it going, man? It's great to have you on the show tonight.
It's great to be here. I'm sorry we had all those technical issues.
Yeah, well,
but we solved them. So
we're kind of used to them off and on. So we've almost become immune to them.
I see. Where are you broadcasting from that your bandwidth is so bad?
I live in Maine, and well, exactly, and I don't live like right in like in any like populated area. I do kind of live out, in the country, and like I was telling the listeners at the beginning of the show, I'm kind of fighting here with my internet service provider to get internet out here. My entire road has internet, and so I've been trying to get it, and they said they're not taking any new customers, which is ridiculous because like I can pull in, internet, the Wi-Fi from my neighbors 150 feet away, but they won't hook me up. And so like tomorrow, I'm calling them tomorrow. I'm gonna talk to like supervisor or someone higher up because I'm not getting anywhere with the call center. I don't think they have a clue what's going on. So, I need internet. It's, slowing down my work, and I can't have this anymore. And like tonight, I'm calling in with a cell phone. So, and I don't like calling in and doing my show on a cell phone with a Bluetooth. So,
no,
anyway.
I don't blame you. Sometimes it works, and more often not. I mean, the Zoom is great when it works, and Skype, of course, but I guess there's no way to connect that way. So we'll just live with this.
Yeah, we're all connected.
Move on to talk about more interesting things.
Yeah. That's all right. So how's life been, Dennis?
Busy, pretty busy, and so far so good. Interesting. I've had a couple health setbacks. Nothing major, but it's kind of it's just more of an inconvenience than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So life goes on. Everything's fine. More or less, it's last year was a very busy year, and this year looks like it's going to be the same. Travel, hoping that winter gets over with soon, and like that, So are we live? Or
yes.
Are we? Okay. Well.
Yeah.
Let's. And I'm talking to Chris and who else?
Well, right now I'm Jeff and Michael, the other host. Chris is grabbing his charger, so he can cut off. But yeah, we can talk about whatever you want tonight. I mean, so.
Well, you set the agenda. We talked in rough outline. We were going to talk about psychedelics and psychedelic healing and those kinds of things. So let's see. I see an email from Chris here that kind of discusses what we're talking about. So you ask the questions and I will respond if I know the answer, and if I don't, I'll make something up. So no, actually I won't do that. But you lead the conversation. You're the interviewer, and I will respond.
Well, I mean, before we get to that,
I'm back. I'm back now. I got my.
Do you have anything to say about the Hadron Collider we were just talking about?
I did hear a little bit of it. I heard about I heard a bit about that there was so much echo it was pretty crazy. In fact, I was looking at the website and I was wondering, am I even on the right show here? Seems like you've got a number of live streams coming off that Blog Talk website. Yeah. So, what about the Hadron Collider? What interests you about it? Yeah.
Could it possibly evolve science, our understanding of everything, to such a degree? And are there any risks? Is Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson, do they have any legitimate concerns that this could be a dangerous thing? And do you know when it's actually going to be activated?
What's that?
I can't find a date of when it's going to actually be turned back on. All I can see is it's going to happen in March.
Oh, yes, it's going to happen in March. I'm not really a physicist, but as I have followed this, I'm very interested in all that, and I think there's a minimal chance that it's going to collapse the space-time continuum or, create a black hole that's going to cause a chain reaction. That's, the chances of that happening are very, very, very remote, right? But
I agree.
But the interesting thing is nobody will say the chances of it happening are absolutely zero. It's not going to happen. There's no way. So potentially it could happen, but there's a very slight chance of it. But it's interesting to me from a standpoint of talking about, in sort of the hubris side of science, the arrogant side of science. There's this sort of attitude, and it both is good and bad. This notion that what drives science forward is curiosity, and that's all to the good. But we now have the capability of doing these experiments, things that we can do, and we do them because we can do them. And a lot of things that we might choose to do, the Hadron Collider is a remote possibility. But we do other things that have a much greater chance of being irreversible. And like some of the genetic engineering things that we're doing and the release of these engineered organisms into the environment and this sort of thing, we can do that. And we are doing that. Without really knowing what the consequences of it are, and so this comes to a topic that I'm preoccupied with in some ways, or at least I'm interested with in some ways, and that's the sort of the disjunct between what you might call our cleverness, our ability to devise these experiments and manipulate the environment and create all these technologies. And all technologies have a double-edged aspect to them. They can be used or misused and cause great damage. They can be used in a way that's more life-affirming, and they're extremely useful. But I think one of the big challenges right now for the human race is to figure out how to match our cleverness with our wisdom, because we're lacking in the wisdom department. And that's what we need to do. We have to find ways to use these technologies, use our capabilities, and in some ways the ultimate tool is our mind, right? We can think up all sorts of things to do, experimental things, way to manipulate the environment. It's interesting to me, though, how rarely we give serious thought to the moral aspects of this, or maybe the ethical aspects. Because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should do something. And where do you get the clarity on the use of these technologies? So I think that's the kind of historical juncture that we find ourselves in, this problematic primate that we are, this curious monkey. We're smart enough to be curious. We still lack evolution. We lack development in the wisdom department. And I think maybe that's where psychedelics come in a certain way, because they can be tools to help us learn wisdom and, learn the inner landscape of ourselves to a certain degree. And
well, that was going to be my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you. There are a lot of dumb people out there. Can we use psychedelics to make them smarter?
I wish it was that simple.
And how do we do it? Do we just do we just get the fluoride out of the water and just put LSD in there? What do we do? I mean, that would be a little extreme, but
it's not clear. I mean, psychedelics can do a lot of things, but if you're dumb, they will not make you smart. And if you're say morally compromised, or if you're an evil person, it's not going to make a saint out of you. And it doesn't work like that. I mean, it may give you pause in terms of some of the things that you might be doing. It might bring the moral and ethical dimension of your behavior into your attention and cause you to reflect. And I think that's all to the good. But this is a problem. As you mentioned, the prevalence of stupidity. And, it's actually getting worse, it seems, and it's infuriating to me, especially in, at this current juncture. We need people who think clearly, and I think there's a lot of murky thinking going on. I mean, and it's almost in some circles, like in certain political circles, it's almost as though being stupid becomes a badge of honor.
Right.
Or somehow, I mean, the whole science denial faction of people who are sort of in the camp of saying, well, I don't really want to understand these processes. I don't really want to know because my mind is made up. Yep. And so, don't confuse me with facts, because it's a settled issue. And you see this especially these days in politics, in the whole climate change denial movement, where the facts are incontrovertible. Definitely, climate change is going on. It's accelerating.
100%,
But you have people like James Inhofe, who, unfortunately, because of the political things, he's the chairman of the Science and Environment Committee. The guy's an idiot.
I'll tell you what,
and not only is he an idiot, he's proud of it.
Very few people I know deny that climate change is happening. I think the thing that we're debating is whether or not it's man-made
or natural.
And I'm under the impression that it is the sun that is doing all this. I mean, right now we're in a record solar minimum, and we seem to be entering some sort of mini ice age. This is crazy. Mm-hmm. So the sun, I'm not even going to say it's 99% the sun. I think it's 100% the sun. I think we're crazy to believe that we could have an influence on the weather. I mean,
nature, man. Nature's more powerful than us.
I get the idea that the atmosphere is only so large. It's actually very small. It's like it's the size of a sheet of paper when you look at the entire. When you look at the Earth from above, and that all these gases get trapped over the years. I get that, but even then, I don't think we have any influence whatsoever. I just think it's completely just the sun. I mean, am I crazy for thinking this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the sun has an influence. I think that natural cycles have an influence, but if you, and I'm the last to say that climate change is entirely human generated. I mean, there are natural processes that are contributing to this, but there are definitely human-initiated processes that are, if not causing the problem, certainly exacerbating the problem.
Right.
And
not helping.
That's, well, for example, if you look at we know that carbon dioxide is the major greenhouse gas so far. I mean, methane is also in the equation, but we haven't had massive methane releases into the atmosphere. Although stick around, stay tuned, because some of the cycles that are destabilizing are going to lead to that. But if you look at the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution, it's gone up precipitously. I can't give you the exact numbers, but there's a critical threshold.
No, it's true. It's
much more abundant in the atmosphere than it was at the start of the 19th century, which was basically the start of the Industrial Revolution.
The only counter to that I could come up with is that if we didn't have the Industrial Revolution and we were still, just tribes and not technologically advanced, then one thing is for sure is that when the sun goes through changes and when the sun naturally heats up the planet, there is a release of carbon dioxide. So when the Earth warms up, more carbon dioxide is released. So all these years, the increase of carbon dioxide could have just been because the sun was warming up the planet naturally.
I also think humans have also, done good for the Earth, too. I mean, think of before we had helicopters dropping water on forest fires. How did we control forest fires? We didn't. We just let them go up in flames.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean,
that's true. We didn't have a way to put out forest fires. But then if you want to talk carbon sinks and those sorts of things, look at tropical rainforest. I mean, there's just a new report that's come out on the influence of tropical rainforest deforestation on climate change and on the emission of greenhouse gases. Where not only are we cutting back the forest, but we're burning it as well. So not only is there less biomass to sequester carbon into those biological matrices, but we're releasing all the stored carbon in that standing forest. So people talk about, we need radical technological innovation to cut down carbon dioxide emissions. Actually, what we need to do is put the fires out. It's that simple. That's 30% of carbon dioxide emissions right there. And
every week we have a new volcano going off. I mean, this is,
that's true.
So we're not going to be able to keep up with this. This is getting out of
our control.
No, it's not. It's not. You're not going to be able to cut down the carbon emissions when there's a new volcano going off every week.
Well, it's not really every week, and the amount. I mean, I understand there are natural processes going on, but the idea that we should stop dumping pollution into the atmosphere and increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide, which is sequestering into the ocean. The temperature of the ocean is increasing as a result of this. The pH is getting lower, so it's creating an acidic environment. This is, I guess the point with this whole, climate change thing is that, for 4.5 billion years, the Earth has been stabilized, more or less, has maintained a situation that is within the parameters that can support life, right? It's the whole Gaia hypothesis idea. At no time has the average temperature on the Earth gone below freezing, or has it gone above boiling. It's always been within that critical range. And partly the reason that is going on is because there are all sorts of homeostatic feedback loops that try to maintain the stability. At a certain point, though, if you destabilize those processes, you can't recover, right? And you get what's called the runaway greenhouse effect. and this is what James Lovelock, who was the inventor, the formulator of the Gaia hypothesis idea, has been concerned about this idea of the runaway greenhouse effect. And if you look at, other planets like Venus, for example, that's an example where this has gone on. And once you cross a certain threshold where you can't reverse it, then it becomes very rapid. And really, there is no way to avert it at that point. So, it's not clear that this is all due to human activity. I'm sure much of it isn't. But the point is, if we can do something to arrest some of these processes and at least control our own pollution,
right?
Make it's a big effect or a small effect, but it is a measurable effect. The general scientific consensus is that a significant portion of climate change is due to human activity, and so why are we blind to this? Why don't we wake up and do what we can?
I agree. I mean, I have no problem with reducing the CO2 output, but our country is refusing to allow imports of cars that are basically 100% oil-free, that run off of just electricity. And instances
like what they're doing with Tesla motors and
right. And then you have Agenda 21. All their attempts to solve this problem seem Orwellian at best. I have no reason to trust the government that they even care about saving the world. It seems like they just want to increase their power every chance they get.
Yeah, like Bill Gates. I heard him recently say, we need a world government to fight climate change.
Yeah, this is crazy. Like, I would trust him or any of his friends to be the leaders of this world government. So Terence, what do you think as far as the benefits to our health, to the intelligence level of the average person, LSD versus shrooms versus, what is the other one?
DMT, ketamine?
DMT.
Salvia?
DMT, yeah.
Oh, okay.
DMT, not salvia. Screw salvia.
Right. And what are you asking?
I mean, which one has its? I guess they all have their benefits, but which one is the best? Which one is the safest? Which one should people experiment with first?
What's your opinion
on
of the three?
I think it's a matter of choice. But one you left out of there that I think is important is ayahuasca.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, nobody ever heard of ayahuasca. Now it's become a global phenomenon, and I think in part, actually, people are so interested in this in a way because of the mystique that it has. It's something that comes out of the jungle. It's from the Amazon, and it's interesting how many people come away from the ayahuasca experience, or they go to South America in search of taking someplace to take ayahuasca, and they seem to come away often with a strong realization about the ecological crisis that our planet is facing. It's almost as though ayahuasca, is an ambassador or something, or a messenger from the biosphere that's trying to get us to wake up. It's basically saying, "Wake up, you monkeys! You're screwing things up and need to think about it." Now, obviously, if enough people realize that, then change will begin to happen. I'm totally with you on the idea of distrusting governments. They seem to be less committed. I mean, it's appalling how much in denial they are, how uncommitted they are to really doing anything. I mean, this problem has been under debate for 30 years. Nobody's really done anything about it, and it's getting worse and worse, and it's happening faster and faster. So I think ayahuasca is, one of the more significant of the natural psychedelics, and the fact that it is becoming well known and is actually escaped from the Amazon now and is being grown in a lot of places, in the States, especially in Hawaii, and it has a global stage. So I think that people are getting the message that way, and it's about time.
How hard is it for me to get my hands to get on ayahuasca at this point? What do I have to do that?
Just Google ayahuasca shredded vine.
Yeah, right. Well, there's various ways you can. The easiest, in some ways the most difficult way, but what a lot of people are doing is they're going to South America and
to the retreat. Yeah.
There's a whole ayahuasca tourism phenomenon that's grown up in Peru. A lot of retreat centers, a lot of people are going down there to have these experiences. And, that's not entirely a good thing. There are problems with that. But basically, I think it's a healthy thing because I think that people are really searching for a genuine spiritual experience, and they're not finding it in this culture, and people are coming from South America and bringing ayahuasca, and I heard someone told me recently, in any average weekend in New York City, of all places, there's 70 to 100 ayahuasca ceremonies going on every night.
Good.
So it's
easier than going to South America.
Taken over, and I think it's about time.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
it has a lot. It has a lot to teach us. If you wanted to get a hold of ayahuasca yourself, well, I don't really advise people how to do that.
Right.
But you can find out. There are places that sell ethnobotanicals and so on. It's not that hard to get the ingredients.
How long does the trip last for?
It varies depending on the person, but usually about 6 hours.
Okay.
Sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 12 hours. but those are usually about 6 to 8 hours, depending on the dose and all that.
I've never done it, but I heard that it speaks to you in rhymes and riddles.
Well,
Putting that way, yeah.
Not so much. I would say, a psychedelic that speaks to you in rhymes and riddles more.
You were asking a total
probably
heavy
mushrooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't really speak to you. It doesn't work like that. It and this is a question about psychedelics, especially these ones like ayahuasca and mushrooms, which do seem to present themselves as though they were an entity, as though they were something that's not you, that is in communication with you. Not exactly in language. It's more like in terms of, it's like an inner dialogue kind of thing. That's how they present. It's very hard to know whether there really is something that's separate from you that you're in communication with, or are you in communication with a part of yourself that is presenting itself as not being you, I don't know that
I've always
matters.
Went back, this is all simulating in my mind what it is.
So the ayahuasca, I got to do that at least once. DMT, would that be the second most effective, or would shrooms be the second most effective?
Well, DMT is definitely something that if you're interested in these things, you should put it on your map. Absolutely. Yeah. You can't understand psychedelics, I don't think, until you've taken DMT.
Wow.
At least once. I mean, in some ways, it is the quintessential, ultimate psychedelic, right? But that said, when people smoke DMT, it's very short acting. It's only about 10 to 20 minutes. So it's very hard to bring something back. It's just what you can bring back is a sense of astonishment and basically like, what the hell was that, you know? So it completely overwhelms you, but it's hard to come out of it with a coherent, you know, message or other than that, you know, this stuff is the most amazing experience that you'll ever have.
Wow.
You know, but what do you do with the material? You know, of course, that ayahuasca is DMT.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right. Yeah, ayahuasca is an orally active form of DMT. That DMT by itself is not orally active, right? Because there are enzymes in your gut called monoamine oxidases that will destroy and degrade the DMT before it's ever absorbed into the bloodstream in an active form.
Okay.
But ayahuasca is made from two plants, at least two plants, but the two key plants, one is a plant containing DMT. The leaves of a plant called chacruna contains high levels of DMT, and that is boiled up with this vine, Banisteriopsis caapi, which is itself called ayahuasca, like the beverage, just to confuse everybody. But the vine contains these alkaloids called β-carbolines. They are very strong inhibitors of monoamine oxidase, of this enzyme that chops up DMT. So it protects it and allows it to become absorbed in the active form. And then, so it's DMT, but it's stretched out to 4, 6, or 8 hours. So, you know, it totally changes the pharmacokinetics of it. It makes it less intense, thank God, because I don't know if I could put up with 6 hours of DMT, you know, at that level. It makes it somewhat less intense, but more comprehensible. And it actually has, you know, this quality of being in a, you know, like the plant teacher effect. Although on DMT itself, you also encountered entities, or what seem to be entities, the self-transforming elf machines that Terence liked to talk about, or whatever. That's just one metaphor. You know, other cultures have similar names for these things, like, you know, the little types and the little people, and, well, they don't look like people. And anyway, so DMT is definitely one to put on your map. I mean, if you wanna work with it. But I myself find that I can't bring much back from it, other than just this incredible sense of astonishment and wonder, and you know, it's amazing. Then psilocybin, magic mushrooms, are also in a form of DMT. You know, these are all tryptamine. Psilocybin is converted to psilocin in the bodies, and so it's what pharmacologists call a prodrug. The inactive form is converted in the body into the active form, which is psilocin. And psilocin is one atom, one small atomic difference in structure from DMT. You know, I mean, if you're a chemist, DMT is dimethyltryptamine. Psilocybin is, well, psilocin is 4-hydroxydimethyltryptamine. So if you know any organic chemistry, that basically means that there's an OH group, an alcohol group on that ring, on the indole ring. It's just different enough than DMT that it is orally active, and it's orally active without any need for an MAO inhibitor. And if you've experienced mushrooms, you know what it's about. It's a very, very interesting psychedelic. I would say in some ways it's the ideal psychedelic.
Yeah, it's my psychedelic of choice.
Right. Lately, in the last few years, ayahuasca has kind of become my psychedelic of choice. But I still take mushrooms, and I still am always astonished by them. I mean, they're a wonderful gift of nature, and they are, they're fairly easy to handle, although you do have to be careful of dose, because if you take a really high dose, all hell can break loose for sure, and it will. But at moderate to moderately high doses, it's easy enough to handle. You learn a lot from it. It's very compatible with human metabolism, so you don't have to worry about toxicity or overdose. In fact, with all of these things, overdose is not not really an issue.
Right.
You would have to take pounds of these things to get anywhere near a toxic dose. And by the time, dose becomes an issue when it becomes, it's not about, is it toxic to the body? It's that, is it, it will get you to some places that are pretty hard to handle if you get onto very, very high doses.
So if I'm going to experiment with this, I would start off with DMT perhaps and then work my way up to ayahuasca?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't know if there's a sequence. I'd say, you could start with DMT. You could go, let's go for the ultimate. The good thing about doing that is...
it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, but it's over in 10 minutes, right? So there's almost no time for anything to go wrong by the time you even reach a point where you're thinking that you're dying. Then the next realization is, no, I'm not dying, and I'm actually already on the way down, because it's very, very fast. I would say that mushrooms are probably the ideal entryway into the psychedelic world myself, because they're gentle, they're funny, and they're profound. High doses they can produce an extremely profound experience. They're highly visual. So hallucinations are
they were
usually
like. Have you ever ate so many shrooms you couldn't tell your eyes were open or closed?
Yes, I've done that.
Nice. Oh, I gotta get there.
Eat a zip of mushrooms, and at the peak of your trip, do a hit of DMT.
Wow.
You can do that too.
It's I can't believe I made it back.
People do these things, and the fact that they do them all the time, and rarely is there a bad outcome, is kind of a testimony of essentially how these things are inherently fairly safe. They're not a threat, they're not toxic or anything like that. The safety issue comes in when you don't pay attention to the circumstances, and that's the main thing that you have in order to use psychedelics in a way that's satisfying, rewarding, and not a threat to you or anyone else, is pay a lot of attention to what the old guys like Leary and Metzner and those people called set and setting, right? Setting is just the circumstances under which you take it, and you should pay careful attention to setting. Best to do it probably not in public, probably in a place that's safe. Do it in a situation where the trip is what you're focusing on. That you're there to pay attention to your inner states, and it's important to have your environment arranged in such a way that you don't have to worry about external stuff. Somebody coming to the door or the telephone ringing, unplug the telephone. Lock the door and don't answer it, or ideally have somebody there who is not stoned, who is can be a sitter, who can just kind of maintain watch over you, maybe not even be in the same room, but be close by, and take care of all those real-world concerns so that you don't have to worry about it. Then you can focus on what's happening in the trip, and then that's where set becomes important. And set is what you bring to it. Essentially everything you've learned in your whole life, everything you know, but particularly your intention for doing this. It's good to think about it before you do it, to prepare. It's not, you can, something like mushrooms, you can approach it recreationally. You can take fairly light doses, and you can have a great time. You can go to parties or whatever. You can enjoy conversation with your friends. I am not one of those people who say you should never use these things recreationally. I don't see any harm in recreation, right? But if you really want to go deep, then you have to be a little more, you have to take a higher dose, and you have to prepare more so that you kind of know what to expect, and you'll get more out of it.
No, I agree. That's a mistake I made with...
this is for psychonaut. But there's nothing wrong with, taking a light dose and having an enjoyable time. It's probably less harmful than alcohol or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you want to get deep, then you have to prepare and pay attention to set and setting.
Completely.
And setting is obvious, and set is a little more complicated. For example, my brother told me once back in the day before I had taken LSD, so that tells you how far back we're going here. I was a teenager, and he said, don't take LSD until you've read Psychology and Alchemy,
wow.
which is a book by C.G. Jung. And I said, well, I'm not going to I'm not going to wait. I'm going to take LSD. But after I read Psychology and Alchemy, I actually understood what he meant, that I would have gotten a lot more out of it if I had read that book. Many of the images and ideas and so on that came up would have been clarified by Psychology and Alchemy, which raises the question of, what the hell were those alchemists up to anyway?
Right.
It was not about.
I think we all know what they were up to.
Gold from lead. I can tell you that it was not about making gold from lead.
Of course not.
And it may have involved a certain psychedelic technology. They may have been mucking around with the plants. But they were projecting their own inner processes onto matter. And that was really what alchemy was about. But if you ever have a chance to look at that book, there are many, many images in that book, and you'll get a feeling for just what a strange set of ideas they were involved in.
Right.
So there are different ways to prepare, yeah.
So let me ask you, what do you know of the drug salvia?
I have not had a great deal of experience with it. I've taken it just a few times. I find it extremely bizarre, and a lot of people do. I find I don't find it pleasant.
I hated it.
I don't find it...
Worst moment of my life, Dennis.
What's that?
It was the worst moment of my life. It was the only time I ever had a bad trip. It was hell for me. It was the scariest moment of my life.
Okay. Well, a lot of people say that actually.
I did it once, and I didn't mind it. I just was, it was the first time, so I didn't know what to expect, and I was at my friend's house, and we're all sitting at the table, and of course, they had me do it first because they wanted to see my reaction.
Right, and, of course.
everything just turned, like all to clay animation, and I just like, I was like, I felt like I was drooling, but I wasn't, and I just all I could think was, like, oh man, I have to leave in a little while, and like, you always get that feeling like, am I ever gonna come out of this? And,
right.
I'm gonna
I didn't even know who I was when I did it. That was the scariest part. So I could disassociate that way. I mean, I thought I was dead. I thought like aliens like killed everybody on the planet and like just destroyed the planet, and I was dead, and I couldn't. All I knew was I wanted to come back to life, and I was terrified. And I was like, becoming one with the furniture. I was terrified, yeah. To not know who you are and to think that like you died is the scariest thought you could possibly think.
Right. Well,
and you didn't correct your thought.
You can get to those places on any psychedelic, but salvia does seem to put you into, some pretty extreme places. I mean, the authorities, people that worry about this sort of stuff, salvia is legal still in a lot of places, and people say, we have to ban this substance. This is very dangerous. My response to that is it's his own best assurance against overuse. I mean, most people take it, that's like, that's it,
but it's
plenty.
The only reason it's dangerous is because I underestimated it. I didn't think it would make me trip at all. I didn't know anything about it, and because I did it by myself in my room, and I did the strongest kind, it only lasted 5-10 minutes. It felt like eternity, of course. And when I came out of it, I had a black eye and a sprained ankle. So I could have definitely hurt myself.
You could have hurt yourself, and
yes.
That's one of the things about salvia that sets it apart from these other things, because people tend to move around on salvia, and they don't know what they're doing.
They don't know they're moving around, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to ideally you have to have a sitter there.
You do, 100%.
And you have to have a person who could actually be a sitter, like a 350-pound friend who could actually sit on you if that was necessary.
He's got to be a real friend, not one of those people that like pretends to be a friend and wants to record you getting hurt on video.
No, they have to have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And, there's no way to arrest the trip, to interrupt it. I mean, there is actually a way you could interrupt it, but that's probably worse than the trip. And it's so fast that the best thing to do is just to, and this is also true of DMT. DMT can get a little intense as well, but the best way to deal with those rapid acting things is just sit tight. No matter what happens, sit tight. In 10 minutes, it's going to be over. And, you'll be more or less the person you were before
for me,
you started.
It would have been impossible to remember that because I couldn't remember anything from my life. So, like, what would be the way to interrupt it? An adrenaline shot?
No, it wouldn't be a adrenaline shot. You know that you may know, or maybe you don't know, salvia is unique among these things in that it's not really a psychedelic in the pharmacological sense, because all of the, what I like to call the true psychedelics, DMT, LSD, psilocybin, all of these, they work on a particular set of serotonin receptors in the brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and it has many different subtypes of receptors. Right. All of the true psychedelics interact with what's called the serotonin 2A receptors. Salvia divinorum is a horse of a completely different color. It does not interact with serotonin receptors. It interacts with one of the opiate receptors, actually the kappa opiate receptors. And in the opiate world, there's basically three kinds of receptors. There's the mu, the delta, and the kappa, right? The mu receptors are what things like morphine and heroin bind to, and they cause analgesia and euphoria and all the things that these opiates cause that make people like them. So that morphine is mainly a mu a mu agonist. Salvia divinorum is a kappa agonist, and it hits only the kappa receptor. It's a remarkable compound in that sense, because most drugs, any drug, doesn't have that kind of specificity for a receptor. But this thing, Salvia divinorum A, only hits the kappa opiate receptors. So you could interrupt it if you give a narcotic antagonist like naloxone. That would snap you out of it immediately.
Wow.
Into possibly a worse place. But, you know, naloxone is what they give people who have overdosed on heroin, because it saves their lives. It essentially kicks that morphine off the receptor and replaces it with naloxone molecule. If you happen to be an addict, though, it precipitates withdrawal, like immediately. You go through all the symptoms of withdrawal instantly, which can be pretty rough on people. You know?
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but it's preferable to death. I mean, that's the alternative.
Right.
You know, so now in like a lot of emergency, EMT teams and so on, they're allowed to have naloxone if they deal with people who have often overdosed on heroin. So ultimately, it's a bit a drastic treatment, but it does work. In the case of salvinorin A, it would knock you out, but again, it would knock you out of the experience. But again, it's probably, if you can just hang on for 10 minutes, it will be over with, you know. And that is totally not the traditional way to do it, right? The Mazatec Indians who do use it shamanically, they would be appalled at the very idea that you would burn this plant, because they know something about how the plant likes moisture, it likes water, it's a water spirit in their cosmology, and they chew the leaves. That's how they do it. It's a very different experience when you chew the leaves.
You know, I'm going to consider that someday, because I've heard a couple different ways to do it that are a lot more mild and safer and a lot more enjoyable. So I have a question I've always wondered, and I have my own theories, of course, but I want to hear what you have to say. Why are these drugs illegal?
Why are they illegal?
Yeah.
Why are psychedelics illegal?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's complicated, but I think that it's a historical thing. I mean, you have to look back at the 60s, basically, and LSD came along and got away. It got loose into society, basically around the end of the 50s or in the early 60s, and you had people like Timothy Leary who really sort of became like the self-appointed messiahs of this message, and LSD was kind of like dropping a bomb into society. You have to realize this was the post-war generation. It was, and there was a lot of stock put in conforming and just being part of the herd and all that. And it was a time of real upheaval with the Vietnam War and counterculture and all of that. And LSD was a catalyst for much of this social change. And there was a backlash, there was basically a backlash in society. The people that ran things, the powers that be, saw this as a threat because, people took LSD and they would say, well, for instance, why do I need to go over to Vietnam and kill people that are just like me? What's the point of that? So it encouraged, in a nutshell, like my brother was fond of saying, it gives people funny ideas. And funny ideas are inherently dangerous to the powers that be. They would rather you didn't think for yourself. You know, and psychedelics encourage people to think for themselves, and you can't, you can't have, the only way that you can have a psychedelic experience is have it yourself. You can't delegate somebody to have it for you. You know, you can't say, "Oh, go have a psychedelic experience," and tell me you can do that, but that's not the same as having one. So I think there was a great, overreaction at the time. Just the idea that, these are drugs, our kids are getting high off drugs we never heard of. It's contributing to social unrest, and all of which was true, But there was also a huge amount of research going on with LSD primarily because that was what was there. Very interesting work using LSD to treat alcoholism, for example, drug addiction. All this work was going on in the 60s, and it was all just pretty much shut down overnight. And all of the known psychedelics at that time were prohibited, initially in the United States and then globally, because the United States has such influence on other countries and more or less dictates global drug policy. So that's why it was banned at that time, But it was also banned because what happened in the late 60s is also an expression in a way of our whole Judeo-Christian tradition, which is religion, unfortunately, has evolved into an institution that's not really fostering genuine spiritual experience. In fact, they're terrified of genuine spiritual experience,
Right.
They're political institutions that are designed to regulate people's behavior and, stop people from asking embarrassing questions, and just kind of clamp down on things. And even though a lot of these world religions probably had their origins in psychedelic experiences, but that was a long time ago, and that particular mystery has been suppressed by these religions and denied. I mean, but there's plenty of evidence that in earlier centuries they were important in these religions, but now it's something for the priests, and it isn't even for the priests anymore. It's,
so
the clampdown was an expression of this general societal tendency to suppress genuine experience. Yeah.
100% agree with that. Now, Dennis, when we do these drugs, are we actually seeing into other dimensions? Are these beings that we're seeing real?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer, and I don't know that anybody knows the answer. I mean, it's almost as though it doesn't really matter because we experience these things as real. Are they real? Well, it's hard to know, and I don't think that neuroscience or any other thing can really resolve that question right now. It's difficult to know because partly the problem is, even when we're not on a psychedelic, when we're not on drugs, we're still immersed in our own neurochemistry.
Yeah.
Right? And our conscious state, our sense of being and our consciousness, that's a neurochemical brain state, basically. That's an illusion. That's a hallucination, if you want to call it that, that our brains construct so that we can navigate through the world. And, but reality doesn't look anything like that. What we live in is a model of reality that our brains create. And it's immensely useful because if we perceive reality as physics tells it looks, it's mostly empty space and things are buzzing around. It's, energy fields and all this stuff. So, if we, it would be very hard to navigate and do things. So the brain essentially constructs a hallucination, if you will,
right.
And that becomes the movie of ourselves that we're living in. So then we come along and we say, okay, we have this movie, which call it the serotonin hallucination, for lack of a better word, call it the serotonin hallucination, and then we tweak that. We take, let's switch channels. Let's go into the DMT channel or the psilocybin channel or, the ayahuasca channel. And it still is similar to normal reality, what we call normal reality, our usual hallucination, but
right.
different enough to be quite interesting.
It's interesting that you say that because this brings up the whole topic of lucid dreaming while we're awake. Is our waking state, are we actually dreaming? Is that what life is? Is it a dream? How real is this dream? Or are our dreams the only thing that's real? All these questions. And as far as being sober and having hallucinations, this is crazy because, I haven't done shrooms in over 10 years. And the other day, I was up for 3 days straight. I didn't sleep for 3 days. And towards the end of that 3 days of being awake, I started seeing hallucinations, like crazy hallucinations, way more than I was when I was on mushrooms. And at that point, I was like, okay, I better go to sleep now. It's probably a sign that I should go to sleep.
Now
right.
Meth users hallucinate.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mention that because sleep deprivation is one of the reliable ways to really induce, these states, the hallucinogenic states. Actually, sleep deprivation, interestingly enough, doesn't resemble a psychedelic like LSD or mushrooms as much as it does something like Datura. Have you ever had an experience with Datura?
What is Datura?
It's a nightshade. You maybe have heard of belladonna. It's in the same family, and the belladonna alkaloids are things like scopolamine, atropine, and this sort of thing. And they don't work on serotonin. These particular ones work on acetylcholine, which is another neurotransmitter, and they block the action of acetylcholine. And they produce sometimes I tell students, I say, the nightshades like Datura is a true hallucinogen, but not a true psychedelic, in the sense that you see things on those compounds, those plants, that you cannot tell if they're real or not. Usually on a psychedelic, you may see things, but you have an idea if they're real or not, right? You can distinguish. On Datura, you see things like people, for example, and you absolutely cannot distinguish them from what is solid in the world you're perceiving. So you can have long conversations with a person, sitting in the chair across from you, and then you look up, and the next thing you know, they've disappeared.
How about that?
And this can be disconcerting.
It was wavy and weird and blurry and wavy, and sometimes I would think I'm seeing like a blurry person, but I could see it through them. It was very weird. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm seeing into another dimension. I better go to sleep. So
So was this with sleep deprivation?
Yeah, that was just from being up for 3 days straight. And another question: have you ever heard a story of two people witnessing the same hallucinations?
Yes, I have. I've experienced that. That's actually not that uncommon. That happens often with ayahuasca.
Now, how specific were these hallucinations?
In group situations, and psilocybin, it's common.
Like how specific were these hallucinations and the order in which they appear, to the point of where you can say without a doubt that these are actually more than hallucinations. There might be something to it. Maybe we are actually seeing into another dimension.
It's so hard to put an explanation to that. You could say, well, we're seeing into another dimension. Everybody is staring into the same room, more or less, of whatever it is. You're staring through this porthole, or maybe it's telepathy. Maybe we're reading each other's mind. We're reading each other's hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
But these conversations they're very difficult to have in some ways because they, we toss these words around like inside, outside, real and unreal, and all of these things imply a certain duality and a certain separation from, the experiencer, from the experience. And those are really illusions. There is no difference. It's all one. And that's one thing psychedelics make abundantly clear is that, that the membrane, the boundaries between us and the rest of reality are really, in some ways, they're illusions. And that's the whole, and we know enough now about the way that psychedelics work in the brain that we can actually see this. There are parts of the limbic system in the brain that have to do with maintaining a sense of limits, a sense of body image, and our location in space and time, and our separation from the external reality. Psychedelic can disrupt that, and then you get the boundless egolessness, boundless mystical experience, essentially. Oceanic boundlessness. That's the word I was searching for. And that's the basis of a lot of mystical experiences on psychedelics, or even mystical experiences on the Natch. They're very similar in that way.
Okay. So, are you optimistic? I ask most guests this: are you optimistic that things will, that the people will be free, that the powers of be will change, they won't be psychotic, maybe will change into a younger generation of people, like things like this will be a thing of the past, and maybe even encouraged in society?
Yeah, I am. I'm optimistic about that. In fact, it's already happening. There's a emerging renaissance, you might call it, in psychedelic research, and it's actually getting a lot of attention now in a positive light. And scientists, medicine, and so on is looking at these things and saying, well, maybe they do have therapeutic properties. Maybe they can be used to treat OCD or post-traumatic stress syndrome, or, you name it, addictions or whatever. So it's getting a lot of attention in that respect. And if you want to make a career in psychedelic research now, you could actually be encouraged to do that. 10 years ago, anybody that wanted to do that, you would say, well, you must be crazy. You want to destroy your career, go down that path. And it's no longer the case. And there are actually several clinical studies underway. I should mention here a couple of organizations that you probably already know about, but one is MAPS. Have you heard of them?
No?
No,
I haven't.
Okay, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies,
nice.
Which is maps.org.
Okay.
And you should check out their website. And then the organization that I'm more affiliated with is called Heffter, the Heffter Research Institute, another nonprofit. And if you go to Heffter.org, that's Heffter.org, you can see what we're up to. And what we're up to, most of the people on our board, the leading researchers in the psychedelic world these days are either on our board or being funded partly by us. And MAPS is sort of, they're doing good work too. They sort of staked out MDMA is the drug that they focused on for treating PTSD. And psilocybin is the one that the Heffter has ended up working on mostly. And we have a number of different approved clinical studies. This is all legal and approved by the FDA and being done at major research institutions like Johns Hopkins, UCLA, New York University, and so on. So science is opening up again to psychedelics. It's still a very small number of people that are involved in this, but they're getting some spectacular results, and that's what's going to open it up. I think there's basically two paths to bringing psychedelics back into the mainstream. One is the biomedical route. These things are useful for different things, different medical problems, and these clinical trials are demonstrating that. And then the other side of it is religious use. And there are two Brazilian churches that use ayahuasca as a sacrament. They don't use it in a traditional shamanic way. They use it as essentially as a sacrament. But they're very much churches. I mean, they have a doctrine, they have temples, they do all that thing. But they take ayahuasca, and both of these religions, one is called the UDV, the União de Vegetal, and the other one is called the Santo Daime. And in Brazil, they have, 20,000 members, something like that. But they also have chapters in the United States. And there has been Supreme Court decisions, particularly in 2006, in favor of their right to use ayahuasca as a sacrament under the religious freedom.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah,
that would be the,
if you don't want to go to a clinic and you want to take ayahuasca legally, you have to join one of these churches. Unfortunately,
that makes sense. That's kind of cool. All of a sudden, I'm feeling kind of religious.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, do you know any good
I do think our society has matured enough that we, a lot of the hysteria has gone away, and I think that we can come back on it now. We've learned a lot. They've been around. They've been part of society for, 40 years, almost 50 years. They've been around. People have learned a lot about how to use these things and about how not to use them, about the dangers. So, I think it's possible that to overcome the hysteria, and I think that in a few years, maybe 5 years, maybe a little longer, but I think in a few years it will be possible to, there will be centers like there are in South America right now, retreat centers that basically serve up ayahuasca. But, in the States, you'll be able to go to a center. It'll be like a weekend getaway, like going to a spa or something. In fact, they might even look a lot like spas, but you can go and you can take your drug of choice and you can have these experiences in a safe environment, and it's like a spiritual vacation, sort of. And I think that's all to the good, because we don't pay, part of our problem in our society is we're so distracted by everything that we rarely find an opportunity to just sit and be quiet and look inside ourselves. And, these practices encourage that. And, we need more of that.
Right. And do you think that, maybe the reason why society is so messed up now, just how the way things are now has anything to do with how humans are so detached from what created humans in the first place?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that humans, at least in our society, because these religions that, a lot of people, you would say, well, if you want spiritual satisfaction, turn to your faith, right? But a lot of people feel that the faith that they were maybe a part of a church or something when they were younger, it's not satisfying to people anymore because it's not really delivering. And people see through it, and they see that, these institutions are not really delivering genuine spiritual experiences. They're more about controlling people's behaviors and sort of create. And I'm all for moral frameworks, but I think moral frameworks should be more built in. They should be more compatible to us and not imposed by some authority from outside. And so I just think that people are not finding satisfaction in their religion, and they're looking for a genuine spiritual experience. And this is why people go to all the trouble of going to South America and looking for. I mean, it's there's an element of adventure in doing that, but there's also a genuine motivation to have a real experience, and most people, well, I mean, sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't, but they go for it.
Nope, I definitely agree with you on that. And another thing that I was kind of curious about, what's your opinion on the neurotropic, like supplements? Like, for instance, Joe Rogan got me into the using the Alpha Brain supplement, and
nootropics.
Yeah, the nootropics. Yep.
Yeah, I was taking Alpha Brain for a while. Actually, he gave it to me when I was on a show. I got a bottle of it, and it sat in my medicine cabinet for like a year, and then for some reason it came up, and they said, "Oh, you should take this." I took it. It was all right. I didn't really get much effect from it that I could see. Maybe I was a little bit more stimulated and whatever. But I think, this is just another area of psychopharmacology that we're now able to explore, this idea of the cognition enhancers. And, have you heard of Provigil?
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's an example. That's one of these things. And, it was a drug that people were using to treat narcolepsy, treating and people who are on shift work and this sort of thing. So it's a stimulant, but it's not speed. It's not like amphetamine. It works by a different way. It has much less of the side effects that amphetamines do, and basically it just keeps you awake and it keeps you alert, but it's not addicting, and it's an example, I think, of this new generation of nootropics, cognition enhancers. It's a double-edged sword, like all these things, like any technology. It's all about how people are using them. So this is the whole problem with with drug education and our sort of twisted, distorted relationship to drugs, because the focus is always on the drugs, and it's like as though the drugs are doing something. The focus should be on human behavior with respect to drugs, which is a longer, more awkward phrase, but that's what we have to focus on. And, drug education programs have fallen down because they focus on, abstinence from drugs. Well, that's not really realistic. People to want to seeking altered states of consciousness is built into the human brain. People are going to find ways to alter their consciousness. So and there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is to find ways to do that minimize any harm that might come out of it and maximize any benefit. And, this is just common sense. So, drug education should be focusing on not don't do drugs, because people are going to do drugs. We're all doing drugs, and in fact, we're made out of drugs, right? That's why they work. So the focus should be how to use drugs, how to use them in a way that's life-enhancing and not life-destroying. But
responsibly use them. I agree.
There's a difference between a user and an abuser.
Exactly.
Right, and that's
a good point, because the abuse, in the drug education world, they talk about drugs of abuse, right? As though there's no way to use these things, without it being, by definition, abuse. But that's just absurd, The abuse comes in the way that it's used, and that firmly sits on the shoulders of people's behavior. The drugs are simply substances. They have the properties that they have. They do the things they do, and there's no moral quality to them. The moral quality comes in how people choose to employ these things. So we have to get clear on that, and we kind of got off the track for a minute, but I was talking about cognition enhancers. I think it's interesting, where a lot of this work is focusing now, and where what's going to drive the research in that area, basically drugs that make you think better, make you smarter, if you will, those sorts of things. It's all related to trying to find something that's effective against dementias, like Alzheimer's and senile dementia and this sort of thing, because we've got this whole burgeoning generation of old people like me, actually, who, in that generation, we're getting old, and a lot of us, as we get older, are going to have these cognitive problems. And, there's a real active search to find drugs that, might be effective to slow that down or remedy that. And so that's where the focus of the research is going to be, and I think we're going to see some very interesting compounds that come out of that. And like any psychoactive drug, there are going to be off-label uses for it. So you may have a drug that's basically to treat, memory deficits in old people, but no reason why they can't treat memory deficits in young people. I mean, there's a whole class of drugs now that have come along that they're not really, you don't have to be sick to take them. They can enhance performance in well people. And I think this is an interesting frontier, and of course it's got its own questions of ethics and all that. I mean, if you use cognition enhancers, so suppose you're part of the issue of using, for example, performance-enhancing drugs in sports, this is frowned upon, right? And in fact, it's so frowned upon that if you're caught doping, you get expelled, or you have to turn the Olympic medal back in. And, institutions that control this say this is absolutely forbidden to do that. What if you're part of a scientific team that is working on an important problem, and everyone on your team is taking Provigil or one of these cognition enhancers, and as a result you pool your efforts, you make a fantastic discovery, and you get the Nobel Prize. Are they going to come back and say, well, you didn't really deserve that because you were on Provigil, you were using a Provigil, which is like steroids for eggheads, right? I mean, right. They make you think better. Is that fair? Is that fair to do that?
No.
Oh, no.
No?
or is it?
Well, that's the question. You know, I mean, is that using a performance enhancing drug, or right, you know, to bring it? So, you know, you made the discovery. You might have made that discovery without that, but it certainly facilitated your thinking, and you made the discovery. So, and the drug was an aid to you. So bring that home to, for example, bring it back to psychedelics, you know. We know that finally Francis Crick of the Watson and Crick team that discovered DNA, you know, on his deathbed, he finally admitted that it was LSD that gave him the insight into figuring out the structure of DNA. I mean, he denied it for years, but finally he said, no, yeah, actually it did. And another famous scientist, Kary Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for the polymerase chain reaction, which basically revolutionized molecular biology. He was totally upfront about it. He didn't conceal it at all. He said, yeah, I figured this out on LSD. It let me get down among the molecules and see what was going on at the cellular level, and I could just visualize it. And you know, and nobody asked him to turn in his Nobel Prize because he took LSD and got the idea. But maybe they should have. I mean, I
guess it's fair, you know, because everyone can discover that drug.
Yeah. And everyone brings to whatever problem they're facing with, you know, with the tools they have available. So if one of these chemicals can help you have better ideas or function a little better, I don't see any real problem with it. But some people would. Yeah. So yeah.
Psychedelics. It's been a cool conversation, though. I like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely learned some stuff tonight, though. It's great to have you on. We are coming to the end of the show here, so. But that's
right. Well, let me plug a couple of things here.
Yeah, please.
One is my book, which I'd like to mention at least, and that's The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. My Life with Terence McKenna. So it's a memoir, and you can buy it on Amazon.com, or you can order it from my website. But probably easier to order it from Amazon. And a lot of people like it. It's sort of my story of the Terence and Dennis story. So that would be of interest to people. The other one I've already mentioned, the Heffter Research Institute, which is Heffter.org, and Heffter, not to be confused with Heffter. That's somebody else. And then there's a great website that you may or may not know about. It's called Arrowwood.org. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I like that one.
That's my go-to site.
Yeah, it is the best source of real, no bullshit drug information on the web. And it covers basically everything. So, you know, and also I urge people, if they're thinking of using any drug, go to Arrowwood and get yourself a crash course on that drug. Usually the information that they serve up there is reliable. There's not so much of it that you get overwhelmed, but it's just a very good.
It's a great archive. It really is.
It's a great resource for this, and send them money. After you send Heffter money, then whatever's left over, send it to them. They're all. It's a shrinking pool, but
Yeah, so those are the three things. Also, if you want to, I might mention, if you want to get an idea what's going on in terms of medical research with psychedelics, there's a great website called clinicaltrials.gov, which is it's a government website. It's administered by the FDA, and if you go to clinicaltrials.gov and you search on, say, psilocybin or MDMA or something like that, all the trials that involve those substances will come up. So you can get an idea who's doing what institutions are involved, what the state of the art is.
Are they positive trials?
They're clinical trials. They're trials that show these are the ones that are still recruiting. These are the ones that are about to start. These are the ones that are finished. And it's not just psychedelics or anything. It's any clinical trials. So you could put in a disease, for example, glioblastoma, and find out what's going on with glioblastoma, what clinical trials are underway. So it's just a quick way to get an idea what the cutting-edge research is really in any biomedical field. But they list all these things going on with psilocybin and MDMA and other psychedelics. So it's a good resource, that's all.
I thought the show was a good resource. I mean, we covered so much, like every possible question that I ever wondered. I mean, and they just came out of nowhere. I was loving it.
You stole a few of my questions too. I didn't even have to ask.
I'm a question thief.
That's great, gentlemen. I'm so happy. Yeah, we had a rough start, but we did get going. So wow. It was great to talk to you.